Joining us now is Marc-Andre. He's the Chief Technology Officer at Utilicase. He began as a power engineer. He's got a deep understanding of utility operations and challenges. And he joined Utilicase, I guess, 13 years ago now, and where he conceived this idea of asset management optimization and has been working on it ever since. Marc-Andre, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, JC. So we'll start with the return of investment of strategic asset management. Those bullet points are part of your return of investment if you follow the methodologies. But there's a requirement. You must have the methodologies. More on this in a few moments. So let's see all those bullet points as a goal. The first one of that methodology, the return on investment of strategic asset management, is to prevent failure. It's the obvious benefit. The second one is to enable operational excellence. Avoiding failure is good. It's just not possible to avoid all failure. So what is important is what we must know is the impact of our choice. If we have to have some failure in our system, which ones are the less critical? It's about making better investments. Do you really know when is the best time to replace or refurbish an asset? I mean, do you really know? Are you ready to bet on your answer? Sometimes we make investments based on intuition, based on the knowledge we have, but basically not very often is based on factual fact. The last one is about forecasting short and long-term failures. Prevent failures is good, is the equivalent of a near miss in aviation. A near miss is when a plane computer took control of the aircraft to avoid a mid-air collision. That's good, but is way too close. Forecast is just like avoiding the near miss before the aircraft leave the airport. That's what we foresee here. We want to forecast long-term failures to just avoid those failures, remove the asset from the grid in that context. So let's talk about the methodology, the 80-20 rules, the famous Pareto rules. We'll use that rules, but we will applying it in other contexts. Which context? The decision context. Today, we spend 80% of our time gathering data and 20% analyzing it. This is not what it should be. What it should be is 20% gathering and 80% analyzing and making better decisions. Don't laugh, it's achievable. The question is how to achieve it. So we can achieve it with a simple methodology. 6 small steps, not 26 steps. The first step is be determined to succeed. Make commitment. Embrace the will to solve the problem. It takes time to do anything in utilities usually. But be determined and you will succeed. Second point, clearly establish your point of pain and prioritize them. You cannot attack on all fronts at the same time. You should build a priority list and stick with it. More important, share the list, share the vision, establish your priority into all utilities, not only in your department, but says T&D investment is a real business paying point. So this is the first priority. Our strategic management should have that angle of attack and share it. You can be surprised that in every part of the utilities, they will embrace your vision or then help you make a better priority list. 3, commit to a methodology that embraces a holistic view of the problems. Stop thinking in silos. See the big pictures and then solve one problem at the time. But you have to see the big pictures. In strategic asset management, data is coming from every part of the utility. So you have to do an holistic view. Number 4, identify which system owns the data you need. Yes, IT and OT people should and must be involved. This is not an IT or OT problem. This is a utilities problem. This is an asset management problem. But the data is into IT and OT system. Remember sharing the vision in point 2. This is the part where you should share your vision with IT and OT department. 5. You should gather all the standard tests, labs, and outage information already available. Do you really know how much information you have? Sometimes it's on paper, sometimes it's in Excel spreadsheet, sometimes in 2000 Excel spreadsheet. But then you have to start consolidating those information. So you should know which data you have. Having a holistic view will help you find those data. 6. Implement analytics tool to deal with the data flood. You will have a data flood. So you need analytics. You need analytics, period. Analytics tool will help you deal with all those data. So basically, if you follow that simple methodology to establish your step to achieving strategic asset management, you should have enhanced reliability, improve asset utilization, and objective evidence to support relations with regulators. Your decision will be based on fact, on repeatable process. So, objective evidence to support relations with regulators. But why do you need analytics? Analytics in asset management are fundamentals. Analytics are the best way to extract relevant information out of gigabytes of data, transforming data into useful information. Remember the 80-20 rules? This is where analytics works best. 20% gathering, 80% analyzing it. This is the goal of analytics. Simulate hundreds of scenarios to find which one you should use. And basically, analytics can do it much, much faster than you can do manually, and they can simulate scenarios you never think of. Analytics are also best to react and advise you when you don't even know you have a problem. Analytics never sleep and have a much greater horizon than the human being. Discover correlation or pattern to take holistic decisions. With analytics, you can consider now all aspects of the decision. If there will be financials, on the operation side, on the maintenance side. Why? Because now you dig into gigabytes of data instead of having only the data you have in mind at the moment you take the decision. So it's going to the next point. It challenges your intuition. It confirms your good judgment if you want. So it's a way to see it. And then it forces you to capture people knowledge and keep it with the utilities and even sharing good practices with your neighbors and your colleagues. But don't count on analytics to manage your asset without you. We are close, but it's still not 1984. Consider political issues. Sometimes there are some data we just can't modelize yet. And of course, take blame for some decision. You can always try, but basically this is not the goal for analytics. The analytics are fundamental tools to support your decision. And this is the key here. It's a decision support system. Analytics are fundamental to support your decision. So what are the fundamental analytics in a strategic asset management process? This complicated chart is the blueprint. It encompasses most of the analytics necessary to achieve a strategic asset management view. So you have to consider asset condition, asset performance, asset operational characteristics. And as you see in the bottom of that blueprint, data is coming from many different sources. So this is why you should prioritize and stick to the plan. Should I address my asset condition, asset awareness problems first, so you're on the right side of the blueprint, or it's more a financial constraint, then you're on the left side of the blueprint. And then you can derive the famous AHI, the asset health, and this is, you can calculate your asset criticality, asset degradation models, knowing the risk to your system. That's grid performance analytics. And the asset investment planning models. When you plan for a red case, this is the kind of actually analytics you should use. These analytics are the answers to questions like, where are my risks? And having a question in the split second. Explain what is driving my current safety. if you have a SAIDI problem for the regulators, having the good explanation and finding the root cause of it is very important. Those analytics will help you pinpoint exactly where the pain point is. How to avoid critical asset failures. What data I'm missing to take a good decision? Analytics are very good in that department too, because analytics use data to formulate an answer to a question. So if it's missing some data, it can provide you with an answer, but good analytics always pinpoint what is missing. If you add those data into the models of resolution, how better can be the answers. And finally, what is the foundation beneath my asset investment planning going for a red case? So this is definitely the role of all the analytics, how it can help you providing best answers to the strategic asset management.
Thank you, Marc-Andre. We're talking about the path to strategic asset management. We just heard from Marc-Andre of Utilicase. Marc-Andre, back at the beginning of your presentation, you said there were 5 sources for ROI, for strategic asset management: preventing failures, enabling operational excellence, reducing risk, making better investments, forecasting failures. If you had to pick one, Danny asks, which of those sources has the largest and most consistent ROI?
If you calculate the return on investment based on the financial aspect of it, of course, going with the make better investment and the asset investment planning is the most obvious way, actually, to provide business value and dollar value going forward. But basically, if you want to lower the cost of your operation and basically the maintenance cost and the OPEX cost, the prevent failures and the forecast and the short and long-term failures are the best angle of attack. So it's always depending which priorities you have in your own utilities. And my experience show me that there's not a single problem. Every problem is different from utilities to utilities. So you have to sit down and says, as a corporate goal today, what is the priority number 1? And you will be surprised that strategic asset management are a key link to strategic objective of the utility. So going into what is my strategic goals in my utility, you'll be able to pinpoint exactly what the first one you should attack.
That makes sense. Well, Peter asks, who owns the O&M and failure data? And is that ever shared across utilities? And if so, how might that happen?
Again, I think it's a bit different based on our experience from utilities to utilities, depending if they are vertically integrated or then those information, usually it's on different departments, but sometimes you have failures is the asset owners that own that information and the operators doesn't have all the information mandatory. But I say that the best source of information for asset failure is in the outage management system. Basically, in outage, you have a lot of information. And then basically, in the maintenance system, you have a lot of information also residing there. But data should always have an owner. So one of the goals, if you remember the 6th step, one of the goals says identify who owns the data. And this is a small exercise that should be written down from the beginning, and then it will simplify the process going forward.
Okay, one more question before we move on and hear from BC Hydro. Marcel asks, does the strategic asset management override the planned maintenance from vendors, or do you do both, or does that void any warranties? How does that work?
This is a very good question. Let me start with a kind of funny statement. Most of the people in the industries always consider that manufacturers build orphans. So that basically they build the transformers out of a blueprint, send out in the field, and then that transformers is operated directly by the utility. So most of the manufacturers lose the tracking of that exact device. So manufacturer came out, and just like your car, you should follow the program of the manufacturer. It's the best way to start using your car. But then, no driver are the same. So depending if you're going with a lot of highways or you're going cities, the maintenance plan of your car should be different. The strategic asset management is to give you a top-bottom approach. Says, okay, where is my risk in my utilities? where is my most critical asset, and then starting to pinpoint to that very specific asset and says, it is very critical. In that context, I should adjust my maintenance plans in accordance with the manufacturers to be sure that my most critical assets are always LT. So it's not going against the manufacturers, it's not going with the manufacturer, it's to really identify why you should spend your time to be sure that that very piece of asset is constantly LT and avoiding failure. So it's working together all the time.
Thank you, Marc-Andre.